What's your emergency? I called a little bit ago, the deputy sheriff saying I found out my granddaughter has been taken. She has been missing for a month. We're talking about a 3-year-old little girl. My daughter finally admitted that the baby's in the store. I need to find her. I told you my daughter was missing for a month. I just found her today, but I can't find my granddaughter. There's something wrong. I found my daughter's car today, and it smells like there's been a dead body in the damn car.
Okay, what is the 3-year-old's name?
Caylee, Caylee, Anthony. They want to talk to you. Anthony, talk to you. Hello?
Hello?
Yes.
Hi. Well, can you tell me what's going on a little bit?
I'm sorry?
Can you tell me a little bit what's going on?
My daughter's been missing for the last 31 days.
Real quick before we start, we just wanted to say thank you to everybody who has shared us with their friends and family and all of the awesome messages that we get. And as a quick reminder, if you have not yet gone onto iTunes and left us a 5-star review, if you have, thank you so much.
We love you.
So please do that, and we'll be eternally grateful when we love you.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hello, I'm Ashley.
I'm Bianca.
And we're the lovely ladies of Creep It Real.
Yes.
Okay. This is a hard one for me because I have been building this up with my preconceived notions. I have been so ready to come in and just fucking start tearing this lady to shreds. And then I started researching and I got myself into a pickle here. I don't know what to think about it, but regardless, this is kind of, I mean, I'm serious. This has really fucked me up, everyone, and Bianca.
Yes.
It's fucked me up. Okay.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. I just really can't believe it. I've listened to everyone to talk to me about this lady, and I have never felt this way before. So, without further ado, let's get into it. So the story of Caylee and Casey Anthony is one that has saturated the headlines for well over 10 years, and there is likely not one of you that doesn't know the basic story of what happened. The child goes missing, the mom is seen out partying in the days following the supposed kidnapping. After weeks upon weeks of lies building on lies, Casey Anthony is finally caught up in all the deception and is arrested under suspicion of murdering her child, or at the very least, covering it up. We've heard everyone's favorite, Nancy Grace's shrill and hysterical voice, repeating the phrase, "tot mom," and calling her a murderer over and over.
By the way, when you look at Nancy Grace doing that, can you not see into her brain? I was watching a documentary and she was in it and just her face and I can see your brain.
Ugh.
Like,
oh, up through her nose, huh?
oh, it's terrible.
I mean, she's really such a mess. She truly.
Ugh.
I mean, she's figured it out. Her own method of making
Yeah,
a
she
ton
has.
of money. But fuck me. Yeah, so she's calling her a murderer. When she was acquitted of the murder charges that were levied against her, I think most of us were fucking aghast that such an injustice could even have taken place. I even teased this episode with the promise of plenty of shit talking and had an intro all written out weeks ago where I called Casey a murderer and couldn't wait to get in here and talk some shit. But the more I read into the history of the family, the trial, the prosecution's case, and their tactics, what I thought were my steadfast opinions began to evolve. Similar to another big case, John Benet Ramsey, which we did in episode 1 and 2, I went into research with one idea and came out with one that was entirely different. I don't think that Casey is a completely innocent victim here, but she's no cold-blooded killer either. As with much of life, the truth lies somewhere in the gray area, and the actual facts paint a different picture than the one that the media attempted to create, which is shocking, I know. So, buckle up, babies, pour your tea, leave your preconceived notions at the door, please, because I know some of you are going to be like, what the fuck are you trying to tell me right now? But I'm just telling you, just leave it at the door. And let's get into the story of the infamous Caylee Anthony.
So the Anthony family was described by friends and family as the quote-unquote all-American family. Caylee was described in her youth as spirited. She had lots of energy. She was super popular, and she was super close with her mom, Cindy.
Conversely, I would describe the family a little differently. By all accounts, Cindy Anthony was a strong matriarch of their small family, verging on what I would call psychotically controlling, which we'll discuss further in depth as we go along. But this kind of control ain't pretty and can cause some pretty fucked up behavior in the people in the family who might already be in the midst of some mental instability. George Anthony, a former police officer, was described by his ex-wife, pre-Cindy, as being a compulsive liar when they were married over 30 years ago. Keep this in mind as we move along here, because lying for George Anthony is by no means new behavior for him, if his ex-wife is to be believed, and that was 30 years ago that he was doing this already. It seems that Caylee learned her lying behavior probably by watching George. For example, in high school, by all appearances, Caylee was a good student. She got A's and B's with the occasional and the rare C, and didn't have any disciplinary issues. But for some reason, she was notified that she was not going to graduate on time due to missing credits. She neglected to tell anyone this until just before the graduation party that her parents had planned for her. The family decided to just pretend that she had graduated, and no one ever found out that it wasn't the case until years later at her trial. But we'll further delve into the bizarre ways these people live their lives as we go along.
So at 19, Caylee got pregnant, and she claimed that she was worried about her mom getting mad. But Cindy told her she was happy and that she would make a wonderful mom. Caylee would not give the name of the father, which is weird, but yeah. Okay. And there's actually still nothing that can be found regarding Caylee Anthony's biological father. Even a couple of weeks ago, there was a small news article that said 10 people that could be Caylee Anthony's father.
10 people. Okay.
Yeah. So I don't know. When I was 16 and even when I was 19, if I had gotten pregnant, my mom had me at 16, and that would have been a different story. Given the fact that Cindy was such a controlling matriarch, I could see why Caylee Anthony would really be scared of telling her mom.
Yeah. Well, I think everybody was a little bit scared of her about
everything. Absolutely.
Also, there's tons of speculation about who the father could be. Yeah, we'll just get into it later, probably. There's tons, obviously, and now there's even articles still being written about who it could be.
Yep.
So, while the public story to this pregnancy may be that of Cindy encouraging her daughter with positivity, the actual story is a little bit different. Per the accounts of every single person in the family's lives, they all, once again, vehemently denied that Caylee was pregnant, just like her not graduating. But at this time, it was kind of hard to pull off until she was in the third trimester, and then they couldn't do it anymore. But people were, for months, confronting them, asking them what was up with Caylee. Is she pregnant? She had a fairly large belly, as she was just like a tiny little thing to begin with. And
also, that's what happens when you get pregnant, is your belly grows.
Right. So, I mean, well into her pregnancy, they were denying it. So there was this one story about them attending a family function where Cindy's brother repeatedly asked her if Caylee was pregnant, saying that her belly button was sticking out an inch, and if she wasn't pregnant, that she needed medical attention ASAP. And Cindy's response to him, in all seriousness, was that Caylee was a virgin and wasn't pregnant. End of story. Her brother later emailed her that she and George would go down as the stupidest parents in history because of this. It's just yet again another example of how the family would rather live in some sort of absurd denial than face, accept, and live what was actually the truth. And this is a theme here. in this story.
So Caylee Marie Anthony was born in Orlando, Florida, and she lived from August 2005 to 2008 with her mother, Casey Marie Anthony, and her grandparents, George and Cindy Anthony. The timeline of events prior to the trial is as follows. June 9th, 2008, Casey and Caylee moved out of Casey's parents' house and in with Casey's ex-boyfriend, Ricardo Morales, and her friend Amy Hizenga.
So I dispute this. I dispute this timeline. This is what the Discovery Channel says happened, but everywhere else it is said that on June 16th, the day that Caylee is said to have died, is the day that they moved out of the house. So I don't know which is actually true. It would be a little bit more, I guess, pertinent to the situation, or a little more, I don't know, damning if she actually moved out the day that supposedly Caylee was killed or died or whatever at the house. Mm-hmm. But we'll discuss it further in a minute.
So on June 15th, Caylee is videotaped visiting an assisted living facility with her grandmother, Cindy, who was visiting her father. Cindy swims with Caylee in the Anthony's pool later that day, afterwards removing the ladder of the pool and closing the date. On June 16th, Caylee is last seen alive at the Anthony family residence. According to the defense, the Anthonys, Caylee drowned in the family's above-ground swimming pool sometime during this day, and both Casey and George Anthony panicked upon finding the body and covered up her death. Now, the timeline of that day is 7 o'clock a.m. Cindy Anthony testified that she left for work a few minutes before 7, while everyone in the home was still asleep. Super convenient. 7:52, activity from Casey Anthony's password-protected account on MySpace, and research for Shot Girls costumes for Tony Lazaro's nightclub events. Tony Lazaro is her boyfriend at the time, and this is the person who we'll talk about a little in depth later.
Yeah, he was a club promoter, so she would go work with him and kind of manage his shot girls that went around selling shots at the club.
Mm-hmm. At 7:56 in the morning, an AIM account for all you youngins.
Like, golly, that's old.
AIM is AOL Instant Messenger. You would clock in. You would log in to your AIM account, and it would have that like little door opening, like.
Yeah. Gosh, that was.
And you had the cringiest usernames
and away messages, like
the
cheesiest song quotes.
Terrible.
Uh-huh.
So that was used to chat on the computer at 12:50 p.m. According to George Anthony, again, known liar. He's lied quite a few times throughout even the trial.
He's a lying asshole.
Caylee departed with Casey by car around 12:50 p.m. with backpacks on their shoulders. Now, although George testified that Casey and Caylee left the house at 12:50, there's further computer activity on the home computer associated with Casey's account, and her cell phone pings do not leave the area of the Anthony family home until 4:11 p.m.
Right.
Maybe he thinks that maybe he's got a really bad sense of time.
No,
but
I don't think so.
I would lean towards that's not the case.
No, it's the first of many inconsistencies in George's stories, but more importantly, it's just another example of the deception that was taking place in this family from long before Caylee's death. Because we all know that Casey had been lying about having a job at Universal Studios to the police, her friends, and family. But what you may not know is that George actually knew this already. And according to internet and cell phone records from the home, Casey and George, and then Caylee by association, were all, or default, I guess, were all at the home together every afternoon while Cindy was at work. So it wasn't like George didn't know she wasn't really going to work every afternoon. He kept the ruse up that Casey was leaving for work at Universal and Caylee was going to some elusive babysitter that no one had ever heard of that no one had ever or would ever meet for a long while long before her death.
So at 139, activity associated with Casey's AIM, MySpace, and Facebook accounts on the home were logged on the home computer, and the last browser activity during that session is at 1:42 p.m. From 1:44 to 2:21, Casey calls her friend Amy. At 2:30, George Anthony testifies that he left the home at this time to go to work. At 2:49, Casey Anthony's cell phone connects with a tower nearest to the home, and the Anthony family's desktop computer is activated by someone using a password-protected account Casey Anthony used. At 2:51 p.m., a Google search is made for the term foolproof suffocation. The user clicks on an article criticizing pro-suicide websites that promote foolproof ways to die.
Interestingly enough, this evidence wasn't presented by the prosecution in the trial, which they claimed to be because of an oversight on their part, but it didn't really make any logical sense what they were saying. They claimed that they missed it because it was on Firefox and that they had only checked the history on Internet Explorer, but that is simply untrue, as they specifically told the jury that Casey used Firefox. What is a more likely reason is that the prosecution saw the inconsistencies between George's timeline and the browser history, and they knew the jury knew Casey was lying about things, but if they also saw that George was lying about events that may or may not have taken place, then it would begin to raise the jury's suspicions of his involvement or guilt or whatever the hell he's trying to cover up, and they wanted him to be their star witness, so that didn't really work out very well for them if he was going to do that. Another element of George's timeline lie that day is that he had already established the lie that Casey was leaving every day to go to work to Cindy. And when he was then asked by the police to give them the timeline of his day, he had the choice of either exposing himself and Casey and the ongoing lie to Cindy about her going to work every day, or he could lie to the police about what happened, and it seems like that's what he chose, was to lie to the police, because he would prefer to do that than to lie to Cindy, because over and over we'll see that he chooses to lie either to the police or to the court or to the FBI. Like, he just lies.
Yeah.
And so it somehow looks like he's more afraid to lie to Cindy than anyone else, even the law. Because for a little more backstory about this Universal lie, this job that she had at Universal Studios, having like a party planning job where she was supposedly making all this money with no education in the matter or in the field or anything like that. People, it's kind of unreasonable, but she told her parents that she was working at a sports authority, and George ended up being suspicious of that and said that he went there one day to have lunch with her, and he couldn't find her anywhere, so he asked another employee if Casey was there, and the employee said that they didn't have anyone there by that name. So he immediately called, this is what they say, he immediately called Cindy to tell her the news about Casey not actually working at the Sports Authority, and instead of getting angry with Casey for lying, she snapped at George, asking why he was following their daughter, saying that if she found out that he was doing that who knows what she would do.
Dude, I've seen, who cares what she would do? She's 22. She's a 22-year-old fucking kid at this time.
And you're still supporting her, Like
what?
It's so bizarre. This family had some seriously fucked up dynamics. It seems like Casey was able to manipulate things with her family because of Caylee, perhaps using her as leverage to get away with less than stellar behavior, as the threat of her keeping Caylee away from them, especially Cindy, was too much for her to bear. And in the same vein, Cindy had this psychotically controlling behavior that drove her to try and scare off Casey's boyfriends, which I believe that she did in part to keep Casey kind of dependent upon her for money, because Cindy had to know that Casey was stealing money from her to get by, because she had literally none and no job. and claims she did. But it was probably an aspect of control that she kind of enjoyed. Otherwise, she would have been happy to see her go get married off to one of these dudes that she had been dating or been engaged to that might be able to help support her instead of constantly sabotaging the relationships like all of her ex-boyfriends and current said that she did. She literally would go to them and say, why would you want to be with somebody that has no future? Or why do you want to be with a sociopath? Stuff like that, which it's like, I'm not denying that perhaps she is a sociopath, but it's bizarre that you're her mom and you're going to her boyfriends and trying to scare them off, you know?
Yeah, that's weird. That's kind of, I always say narcissistic, but that's some pretty narcissistic behavior. Like to just want to keep be in control of your daughter. Yeah. Why? For what purpose?
It must be because of Caylee. Like she was worried that she was going to never see Caylee. Maybe. I mean, I can't say must, but she's also extremely controlling. She's controlling with everybody.
I got that too when I was watching that documentary. She said that when Caylee so Cindy was the first person to hold Caylee when she was born.
Guess who that reminds me of? The grandma in Hereditary.
That reminded me of the grandma in Hereditary too. I swear to God.
Shit, dude.
Yeah, so she was the first person to hold Caylee, and she said that when she held her, it was like her whole world changed. Mm-hmm. And she also said that it was like this is probably like her saving herself, to be honest with you. But she said that it was like holding Casey again in her arms because she was reliving the moment that Casey was born. Mm-hmm. Or something like that. I mean,
yeah.
You didn't let her mother hold her?
That's pretty bad. That's pretty bad.
That made me so upset. I
wouldn't be surprised if she had her tit out and she was like, I was trying to let that kid suckle on me. But in fact, at the time, Casey had been lying about her boyfriend at the time, Tony Lazaro. She told her family that she was dating a single father and was completely hiding Tony's existence from her parents. And it was likely to avoid her mother's meddling. And who can blame her? Because she's a psycho. Yeah. That's terrible. Casey is a piece of shit, but listen up. You can't tell me that those parents did not turn that girl into whatever psycho that she has become.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry. Whew.
So, 2:52 p.m. the same day, there's additional activity on MySpace because I'm sure, like all of us, she was obsessed with MySpace and getting her profile looking just right.
Oh, yeah. And I think they said that she would even, like, do other people's profiles. She was so into MySpace.
Hey, you know what? She could have been a programmer. At 2:52, Casey answers her phone call from Jesse Grunt. He later describes the conversation as abnormal, where Casey stated to him that her parents were divorcing and she had to find a new place to live. Weird lie.
Yeah, it's a weird lie. It's also her ex-fiance, so he does know her fairly well.
They're on the phone for about 10 to 15 minutes at 3:04.
Wait a second. What if that isn't a weird lie because they were having marital issues for a long time since Caylee was born, and maybe he was it's likely that he was there when the death occurred, and then maybe she was like, oh, mom's gonna fuck him up now. You know what I'm saying?
No.
You don't?
No.
That she's like, mom's gonna fuck him up because Kaylee's dead now. All his fault. It's all his fault.
So you think it's George Anthony's fault?
I don't know it's anyone's fault. And we'll get into it.
So at 3:04, Casey disconnects the phone call from Jesse and takes an incoming call from George Anthony. According to her, the 26-second phone call from her father took place as soon as he got to work, telling her, I took care of everything, telling her he disposed of the body and warning her not to tell her mother about the child's death.
I mean, I don't necessarily think she's lying. I mean, she's probably lying.
There's lies upon lies
but
upon
I bet
lies.
You,
so there's really no...
Maybe somewhere in there's some grain of truth.
It's very difficult to say. There are so many lies about so many menial things that it's like... Okay. So at 3:34 p.m., Casey makes a phone call to her then-boyfriend, Tony Lazaro, which goes unanswered. Between 4:10 and 4:14, Casey makes 6 unanswered phone calls to her mother, Cindy. At 4:11, Casey's cell phone pings, indicating that it was at or near the house until she headed towards Lazaro's apartment at 4:11 p.m.
So this is when I believe this is when Casey abruptly moves out of her parents' house and Caylee is never seen again. Whether she really moved out this day is significant, like I said, because this is after all that flurry of odd behavior that is completely out of the norm for her, almost every single day, typical internet, cell phone stuff that she was doing. And it is the presumed death of her daughter that happened on that day. This begins some further odd behavior by Casey.
So at 7:54 p.m. that day, she and Lazaro are seen entering and walking around casually at a Blockbuster video store, which, again, those of you who don't know what Blockbuster video stores are, you used to go into this store called Blockbuster, and you would have a Blockbuster card, and you would be able to rent out movies. It was like a subscription service. Kind of like how Netflix is, but you would be able to physically take the movies and pick out whatever movie you wanted and be able to rent it for 3 days. I think it was 3 days. You could rent out video games. It was pretty legit. Yep. And anyways.
It was everybody's favorite.
Hell yeah, that was a Friday night jam.
Friday night. That's what I was going to say.
Hell yeah.
Everybody's favorite Friday night.
Go get a Blockbuster movie, get some candy at the Blockbuster. Yep. Maybe sometimes your movie wasn't there, so you were like, tell me when it's back, and then you'd have to be placed on a waiting list. My parents and I used to go to Blockbuster all the time. Anyways.
If you wanted to watch softcore porn from the video store, you had to give it to the person to check you out.
So at this time, Caylee is not seen with them.
Yes, so where would Caylee be? At this point, George Anthony stopped calling Casey altogether. So after this day, all of a sudden, after talking to her every day, I mean, they're not super duper close. They don't have like an amazing relationship, but they talked fairly often. But after this day, the 16th, after she moves out, he only calls her one time, and it's on July 8th. But that was the one and the only time that he calls her after this. So that's weird, okay, everyone? It's a little bit weird. Casey moves out unexpectedly. They can't find Caylee, and Cindy's completely losing her shit about it, but he isn't contacting Casey at all or trying to find Caylee at all. I find that to be just slightly interesting.
I mean, are you kidding? My grandfather and I, especially, like, my mom was a single mother until she married my dad when I was 8 years old. But my grandfather and I were super close. That was my father figure growing up. When he would come home, I would be like waiting for him to play a game with him or some stupid bullshit game that I had made up. Yeah. That was my father figure, dude.
Well, I'm sure your grandfather was a great dude and not a completely fucked up psychopath like George Anthony.
For sure. I mean, he is. But that's what I'm saying. That being the product of a single mother and living with my grandparents at the time, I had two moms, which was my grandmother and my mom, and my grandfather was my father figure.
Yeah.
So it's weird that he wouldn't call to check up on Caylee, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, it's totally weird, and it's out of character also. So,
absolutely.
It's just one of these, it's just so, you have to, it's funny because in this story, lying isn't an oddity, but so you have to like pick out the other things that are changes in behavior, because guess what's not lying constantly.
Right.
When questioned by police about the fact that he hadn't tried to contact Casey, George claimed that he was trying to find Caylee, and to prove it to them, he said that one day Casey came over in her white Pontiac, which was having engine trouble, that she needed to borrow Cindy's car, and George claimed that he then followed her to try to find out where Caylee was, but he lost her on the highway. He said that Cindy had tried to persuade him not to follow her, which she didn't even recall, and the cell phone pings from that day in question proved that it never even happened at all. So he just made up this story to try to make it sound better that he wasn't trying to contact his daughter. Mm-hmm. But how do you, in your brain, think, I'm going to make up a completely non-existent story that can be disproved, instead of just being like, I wasn't calling her because I was pissed and that's why.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's just crazy. I mean, they just have a seriously seriously bad problem with compulsively, almost habitually, I mean, not almost, habitually lying. It is some of the craziest shit I've ever seen.
Yeah. On June 17th of 2008, George and Cindy Anthony noticed that the gate to the swimming pool is open and the ladder is next to the pool.
So, interestingly enough, which I find this to be slightly interesting, Cindy made it a point of telling her neighbors and coworkers that, quote unquote, someone has been using their pool because the ladder was out when she knew she'd left it laying by the house, not up against the pool. I don't know, dude. I don't know. I think it's fucking weird to be like going to work. Man, somebody is using my pool. Someone's almost always there, lady. No one's just gallivanting in your pool without anyone noticing it. And like you just used it. I mean, it's fucking weird. She doth protest too much, in my opinion. Sorry, I'm getting worked up about it a little bit.
On June 28th, 2008, Casey Anthony is captured in various photos partying at the Fusion nightclub and participating in a hot body contest during a time that her child is already missing. Like, we don't know where Casey is. This is the timeline in which Caylee is already missing.
Right.
So, what you doing, mama?
Right. Okay. So this is where I'm going to start to lose some of you, but just stick with me for a second, because I am not in any way saying that this is not fucked up beyond measure. It's totally fucked up that the Friday following your daughter's being quote unquote kidnapped, which is what she later says, even if it's the Friday after your daughter died and you covered it up, you are going to a club and entering a hot body contest. That's fucked up. I totally agree. But it was taken by the media and they ran the fuck away with it. And it didn't really transpire quite the way that they wanted to paint it. But still, it's not okay. But Tony, like I said earlier, was a club promoter for that club Fusion. And when Casey moved in with him, following moving out of her parents' house and covering up Caylee's death, she would go up to work with him and help him out, and he put her in charge of those shot girls, like I said. So all those shot girls, after the murder investigation began, all gave raving reviews of Casey, saying that she treated them like a mom. If they were harassed by somebody, she would send them home, that she was just all around wonderful. Not that makes any difference. The hot body contest that they put on, so what happened with that was they didn't have enough people entering it. So one of Tony's friends, who was also a promoter, asked her if she would enter it, which she did. She still sucks, don't get me wrong. It was stated numerous times by friends that Casey was typically a major homebody and would rarely go out. If she did go out, she typically would only have one drink or she would be sober, but she typically would agree to go out with the friend and then she would pull out at the last minute and cancel on them. I think that was probably a part of her habitual people-pleasing problem, where she had trouble saying no, disappointing people. She would prefer to agree and then later cancel because of some thing like Caylee, or she would use work as an excuse a lot of the time, even though she didn't even have work. And it's seen as a pattern with her with tons of people over and over and over, where she would agree to do all these things and then she would cancel at the last minute. So when she moved in with friends and her boyfriend, it ended up that she didn't really have a lot of excuses of why she wasn't going to go out. So for that week, there was like a couple weeks where she went out fairly often. And another time where she was going out in that same week span was when she moved in with her friend Amy after her boyfriend went out of town. So she moved with her friend Amy. Amy has testified that she liked to go out around 3 times a week and was constantly trying to get Casey to come out with her, but she would always say that she couldn't, or like I said, if she did agree to go, then she would typically cancel because of work or not being able to find a sitter. And while the media painted the picture like Caylee was being raised by her grandparents, according to all the character witnesses, this was far from actually what the actual case was.
Yeah.
When Casey was living with Amy, though, she didn't have an excuse, like I said, so she went out. But that is also, just like George Anthony not contacting Casey anymore after she moved out, Casey going out and partying, quote unquote partying, was actually kind of a switch in her behavior. And it wasn't like she was doing this before Caylee was dead. It's still super fucked up that you went and did it, for sure, but it wasn't her standard operating procedure. And I will say this, I have listened to a few podcasts in the past week with FBI agents who worked on the case and people who are supposed to be super credible, and they're sitting there saying stuff, repeating it as fact, that isn't fucking true about the case. And I find that to be pretty irritating, because that's the kind of shit that I was hearing and going, oh, okay, that's who I'm trusting, because this guy was an FBI agent who worked on the case. And then I'm listening to him today while I'm working. He's like, she was going out and partying like a rock star. That was the least egregious thing. But I'm like, I would sure as shit hope rock stars are partying better than that. Going out and having 2 beers. Regardless, she still sucks. I know, okay? I'm not saying she doesn't. Your kid is dead, and you're really handling it like a cunt.
So on June 23rd of 2008, Anthony Lazzaro testified that he helped Casey break into the shed at her parents' home to take gas cans for Casey's car, which had run out of gas. Lazzaro said he watched Casey open the trunk of her car, and although he did not see the inside of the trunk, he said that at that time there was no odor that he could detect.
I'm pretty sure you'd be like, boosh, if there was. That's what you would say, is boosh.
On June 24th, the next day, George Anthony called police to report the break-in and report the gas cans missing. Later this day, he saw Casey at the Anthony residence and confronted her about taking them. George says that when he went to get them out of his daughter's car, she ran past him, quickly opened the trunk, and retrieved the gas cans herself, yelling, "Here's your fucking gas cans." George testified that he smelled gasoline in the car, but did not detect any other odors.
It's so irritating how many times he makes up different stories. So while this is what George testified in court for the prosecution, in his first interview with the FBI right after it occurred, he said that he confronted Casey about the gas cans that she stole, and she went to get them from the trunk. He was standing right by her, and when she opened the trunk and he saw right inside, he saw that there were clothes in there was a collapsible blue bin that they all had in their trunks for that kind of stuff. He didn't smell anything, and he saw the goddamn inside of the trunk. So that was what he told the FBI right after the incident. And I find it odd that now, months later, for the prosecution, he is now saying, I didn't quite see inside. And, you know, she was being super evasive and then drove off and left real quick the minute she grabbed the cans and threw them at me because she didn't want me to see inside the trunk, when you actually did see inside the trunk. Because what you're trying to do there is paint a picture like you weren't close enough to smell it or see it or know anything was inside or anything like that, when in actuality, you damn did. So, I'm sorry, but George Anthony he's a devil.
He's not the devil, but they're all liars.
Devil. Yeah,
they're all liars for sure.
Yeah. Either way about it, the cell and computer records for that day don't match up with anything that George claimed about that afternoon in the first place. Casey was on the phone with her friend Amy around the time that she arrived at the Anthony home, and then she immediately got on the computer and posted on a friend's timeline talking about there being drama at the Anthony house.
God. I hate that.
She then made multiple more calls and texts and was on the computer for almost the entire duration of her visit there until well after 3, when she still, on the phone, begins to ping away from the house. Yeah. So nowhere in George's testimony does it mention her being on the phone or on the computer. He just said she came in and she had to rush around to go get clothes from her room because she had to go back to work. They got in a fight about the gas cans, and then she sped away like a bat out of hell around 2, which doesn't line up with the actual facts that you can look at.
Yeah,
which is
the cell phone towers and everything. Yeah.
That's all you have with these people because they lie like mugs.
Yeah. On June 30th, Casey's car is towed from a parking lot after being there for several days. Her purse and a child's car seat are found in the car's back seat. Which, your purse, dude, that contains My purse contains my life.
Oh, your soul and heart and your passions and dreams live inside your purse, Bianca?
My wallet.
Okay. Guess what? You need a new license anyway. Throw that purse in the wind. Okay. Oh, and so on this same day, Tony goes out of town, and Casey is, I assume, it appears as if she is trying to avoid her mother at all goddamn costs, which, again, I don't blame her. But she then moves in with her friend Amy and I think it's her ex-boyfriend, Ricardo, but maybe it's now Amy's boyfriend. I'm not really sure about that part. But either way, she moves in with those two knuckleheads.
On July 2nd, Casey gets a tattoo on her back saying Bella Vita, which means beautiful life in Italian.
There's another poor decision, lady. Come on.
Yeah. I mean, I've got crappy tattoos, but Christ.
That's not what I mean.
That's what I mean. Oh, you mean in the timeline? Oh, I thought you meant her life decisions. Okay.
Oh, that's good. Okay, so on July 6th, Tony comes back
my birthday.
Oh, yours? Oh, yeah. Look at this. On your birthday, Tony came back in town, so Casey moved back in with him. What a great present for you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
July 13th, while doing yard work, Cindy and George Anthony find a notice from the post office for a certified letter affixed to their front door saying that Casey's vehicle was in a tow yard.
Well, this letter was actually the second certified letter sent to the Anthonys in regard to this towing of Casey's car, as it had been at the lot for now 2 weeks. And it was standard operating I keep saying this, standard operating procedure to send the first notice out within 3 days of towing. So what happened to the initial letter? Did George keep it from Cindy because they were unhealthy? When the pair went to the tow lot to retrieve Casey's car, the bill had racked up to over $500, and Cindy was furious. I don't blame that part, for sure. She reamed the tow company people and was incredulous as to why they hadn't sent them a notice sooner, and they claimed they had, but Cindy had never seen it. And when the tow employee and George left to retrieve Casey's car together, the first thing that George did was profusely apologize for Cindy's behavior, telling him that their granddaughter was missing and they were very stressed out. He then stated, "We're probably going to get divorced over this." And the tow driver said it seemed just like he was venting, but I mean, it's his first fucking thought.
It just seems like a weird thing to vent about.
It definitely does, but I think that I think George, just like what's her name, Casey, what's her goddamn name, they both want to avoid confrontation at all costs. They want to avoid any kind of uncomfortable situation, and the fact of the matter is that he likely hid that first notice from Cindy to begin with, so he knows they actually sent it, and then he's also so embarrassed about the way that she's acting because of that, and also because he hates that kind of situation. And then also, he feels like he's got to apologize and yada yada. But also, I think that's just one of those slips of the tongue. I don't necessarily mean slip of the tongue, but where you're stressed out and you just say what's the first thing on your mind, even if it's dumb as shit.
Yeah.
And it's that he's constantly scared and terrified that Cindy's going to divorce him. I'm pretty sure that's how he lives his life.
Yeah.
So keep that in mind as well with all this stuff that goes on.
So when George got to the car, which was a 1998 Pontiac Sunfire, he and the tow yard attendant noted that there was a strong foul odor emanating from the trunk. And he actually later said that they believed it to be a decomposing body. However, when they opened the trunk, they saw that it only contained a bag of trash. Just real quick, Florida's humidity, anything in there is going to stink to high hell.
Yeah.
However, I completely believe that the family killed Caylee. I actually believe Casey still killed Caylee.
Mm-hmm.
But it just seems weird that their first instinct was to think that it was the scent of a decomposing body. Unless they were just like, ugh, it smells like something died in here, which everybody says to, like, signify a foul stench in passing. I mean,
yeah.
You know, like, you smell something, you're like, ugh, did something die? Like, it's kind of a joke, but in this instance, the granddaughter is missing. Everybody's, like, looking for Caylee, or nobody's looking for Caylee at this point, but it's like,
right.
You don't make that kind of a joke in passing.
No. I do understand where you're coming from, though I will say this, that living in Texas in the heat and humidity here, in the summer especially, there have been a lot of times where, especially when I was living out in the country, but when I smelled that sickly sweet aroma that I know is a dead animal somewhere. So, you know, I don't think I've ever smelled an actual human dead body, but I've definitely smelled dead animals and been like, oh, that, you know it, you know?
Oh, yeah.
So, but what I do think is odd is that both of these men, they claim to be so sure that the smell that was emanating from the car was death, yet the tow guy, which I have his name later and I don't remember it now, but I'm not gonna go searching for it. So the tow guy and George, neither one of them called the police. The tow guy knew that George's daughter and granddaughter hadn't been seen in a long time, and he still didn't call the police. He later testifies, I would never have let somebody take a car I believed had a dead body in it. I would never allow that to happen in the first place without calling the police. So I don't think he really thought at the time that it was a dead body.
Yeah.
I think maybe once
news came out or whatever about it.
Yeah. Maybe then. But at the time, they chalked it up to trash, because worse yet, if George's lying ass really thought it was a dead body, he simply drove the car home. He went back to work. He didn't call Casey to see if she was okay, to see if Caylee was okay. He didn't make mention of anything. Well, actually, Cindy did ask him what the smell was, because he drove home with the thing with all the windows down. It was raining, and he still drove with all the windows down, the sunroof open, trying to air the car out. And he told Cindy, when she asked, whenever he put the car in the garage, that there was a rotting pizza in the trunk. And that became a huge thing in the media, that there was rotting pizza in the trunk. There was not rotting pizza in the trunk. There was a pizza box with no pizza in it in the trunk, and then a trash bag filled with shit.
Yeah, they said that the pizza had been covered in maggots, and
it's not true.
Yeah.
Also, I mean, has anyone never lived in their early 20s with a roommate?
I mean, are you kidding? Pizza doesn't smell. Rotting pizza, rotting food doesn't smell like that. I just took rotting chicken out of the fridge. Sorry, Shayna, but it didn't smell like a dead body.
Oh, you're outing. Wait, are you the one that made the rotting chicken, or is she the one that had the rotting chicken?
I did. I had a rotisserie chicken.
Okay.
I didn't finish.
I was like, why are you're apologizing for her rotting chicken?
No, I bought a rotisserie chicken from Costco. I didn't finish it. Ooh.
Okay.
Ooh.
But it dries up.
Mm-hmm.
All that shit's preserved to the gills.
Oh yeah.
Like
it just shrivels.
Ridiculous. Yeah, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. But anyway, so we'll delve more into this mystery and sometimes phantom smell of the trunk in a little bit. And maybe next episode. I don't know. We'll have to see. Well, I'll say both. Well, in a little bit.
Or next episode.
There are some serious discrepancies regarding that smell, the garbage that was found there, and whatever else was discovered in that trunk.
So on July 15th, distressed because Casey has not brought Caylee home in a month, Cindy tracks down and meets with Amy, who takes Cindy to the apartment where Casey is staying and makes Casey come home. Casey tells her parents that she hasn't seen Caylee in a month and that a babysitter named Zenaida Fernandez Gonzalez, that everybody called Zanny the nanny, may have kidnapped her. Zenaida is described as half black, half Puerto Rican, and 25 years old.
Racist.
I mean, I don't know. I don't know. Zenaida in Florida, maybe they're just trying to be like, okay, this is the most common kind of person. Puerto Ricans in Florida are so common, especially Zenaida.
At this time, Cindy doesn't even remotely ask, because Amy brought her over to Tony's apartment, and Cindy doesn't even ask if they've seen Caylee. Has anyone seen Caylee? She doesn't even mention Caylee. So it's not like she's sitting there frantically looking for Caylee. Yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So it says Cindy Anthony immediately calls 911 and reports her granddaughter Caylee missing, which is weird for a couple of reasons. First of all, she wants her 22-year-old daughter arrested. And second of all, the child's own mother is acting nonchalant about the whole thing. Actually, the first 911 call, she just says, my daughter's car stinks. It smells like something died in the damn car.
Mm-hmm.
Like, are you calling 911 to complain about your daughter's car?
She later said that she only said that about the fact that it smelled like a dead thing because she wanted the cops to get there as soon as possible, because she was just like freaking out because she wanted to get Casey under control.
I mean, that's not how that works.
No, but it is.
Are you fucking kidding me? That pisses me off, because that's just saying, okay, well, if I act as not uncontrollable, but if I act as frantic as possible, I'll get what I want. And that's not the way that the world turns, ladies and gentlemen.
Unfortunately for 911, it is, because they can't say,
Are you joking? And that pisses me off, because now we're using resources on somebody who just wants to get their daughter quote unquote under control. Bye.
Yeah.
So she's reported missing in a 911 call placed by Cindy, her grandmother, who says she has not seen Caylee for 31 days, and that Casey's car smelled like a dead body had been inside of it. She further explained that Casey had given Cindy a variety of explanations as to her daughter's whereabouts before finally telling her that Caylee had not been seen for weeks. I did do a little bit of a further dive into that 911 call, and I came across a video in which Casey can be heard in the background of the 911 call while Cindy is on the phone saying, I don't have anything. She literally says, I don't have anything to talk to them about, which kind of, to me, provides further proof that she was most likely not going to do anything to assist the authorities in doing anything to find her daughter.
Well, no, because she hid her somewhere.
I mean, that's my thought.
Or George did.
Somebody did, and nobody's doing anything to assist.
Yeah.
There are contradicting statements that Casey Anthony made, from saying that Caylee was with Zenaida, who, in fact, by the way, does exist, but she told investigators that she had never met Casey, she had never babysat Caylee, and again, like we said, she had never been seen by any of Casey's family or friends. She also said that Caylee was at a theme park or at the beach. There are so many places to be in Orlando. I mean, I'm sure everybody was like, oh, okay, I guess this kid's just living a fulfilling childhood.
Yeah.
The night of the 911 call, John Allen, who was the detective sergeant at the time of the investigation, responds to the call with a couple of responders to meet with the family about the stolen car. And then he learns that Casey and Caylee live there, but Cindy claims she hasn't seen either of them in weeks. So the timeline of them moving out or not moving out or whatever is very foggy. It's very murky. As you can imagine, when a mother calls the police on her own daughter, there's complete chaos going on within the house. Cindy and Casey are yelling at each other back and forth, and supposedly this is actually where the bombshell that Caylee is missing blows up, because according to her, this is the time that she learns about it, which, again, who knows? Right.
Well, we know that's not true. We know that that's not true. We know
that there has been,
that Casey knows her daughter is not taken by Zenaida Fernandez Gonzalez.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
They go to where Casey says Zenaida's apartment was, and they discover there's no furniture in the apartment. After talking to the landlord, they find out that there has never been someone named Zenaida who rented there, and the apartment had been vacant since March of that year. They even pulled the surveillance of the apartment, and Casey had never been seen there.
I'm shocked.
Yeah, I know. What?
I know.
On July 16th. Happy birthday, Tiffany. My cousin Tiffany. Police investigators discover Casey Anthony has been lying about her place of employment. Which she has told them that she was an event planner at Universal Studios, and she even goes so far as to tell investigators that she had confided in 2 coworkers at Universal Studios that Caylee had been kidnapped.
Nobody else but imaginary coworkers. Okay.
I'm like, geez. I mean, think about really going on with a lie, dude.
You're nuts. Yeah, I mean, it's nuts.
Furthermore, the people she said that she confided in at Universal Studios had never worked there. So,
no.
At this point, everything that she has told anybody is a lie. And investigators decide to set a trap to catch Casey in the lie. And when they go with her to work, quote unquote work, she gives her name to the employee at the employee entrance, and he looks for her. He says there's nobody here that works by that name. Then she gives the name of her supervisor and his extension.
She doesn't work by that name. She only lives by that name. Okay.
Oh, is that how that goes? Okay. She additionally gives the name of her supervisor and his extension, and the guard just looks at her like nobody is employed there by that name or the supervisor's name.
She is tenacious with it, at least.
She is.
Sticks with it,
I mean, at least if she's anything, she is determined.
Determined as hell.
Mm-hmm.
So this was kind of a tricky area for the police, and they knew it because they were setting up all these scenarios to catch her in her lies that they knew she was making, yet they hadn't read her rights and weren't technically arresting her so that they could avoid doing so. And she sucks, but that's not right either. So I don't know how I felt about that. There was actually a juror who was alone on it, but wanted to absolutely just throw the whole case out because her Miranda rights were violated. And it's true. They were. Because it states in the Florida Constitution that if you're presenting someone with their guilt in their face, then you must read them their rights. And they were doing all kinds of tricky shit to get away with not doing it. And they put her in handcuffs initially and put her in the back of a squad car, and then because they wanted to try to catch her in a lie, they had them take the handcuffs off of her. And then in court, they pretty much their prosecution made their entire case for some of their points by just going on and on about how she knew she could leave if she wanted to. It was all they cared to talk about because they knew they'd fucked up.
Yeah.
And in the end, it did end up fucking them up a little bit too because they totally violated her rights. So I know she's a big, old, giant blob of suck, but we can't be the judge, jury, and executioner for people. We have our rights for a reason.
There are laws set in place for a reason, for sure.
Right.
So the supervisor, the real supervisor, swings on by and says, "Let her in." And she's there waving at people and saying hi, which to me makes me get such secondhand embarrassment because people are like looking at her like, hi?
She has some serious
Huge
serious
balls.
issues. Well, yeah, I mean that's sociopathy or something right there. That's serious. Like that you can go and be like, hey, good to see ya.
Dude. So they come to the dead end of a hallway, and eventually she admits she's like, yeah, I don't work here.
Gave it up finally.
Yeah. She admits that she had been fired from there 2 years prior. And like we discussed, she had even told her parents that she was working there, but apparently George knew that she wasn't. So the only person that was not in on the lie was Cindy. Supposedly.
I mean, who knows? She might have known and just pretended like she didn't know because that's how batshit crazy she is. Supposedly, according to this BS FBI agent that I listened to earlier, she was even leaving notes out around the house from coworkers that didn't exist to be, keeping up with the ruse or whatever. But also, sometimes these people like this FBI agent, I understand that you believe she did something and you're mad that justice wasn't served, but you are on a mission now to do some shit that isn't right either. Like, you now are going in the opposite direction for vengeance about stuff that's not even true. So I'm like, I don't even know if I believe you about that, but who knows? And who even cares, because I'm sure she did write notes. And maybe George and her wrote notes back and forth pretending to be coworkers for all we know. So I had always gotten the impression that Casey was just a fuck up all along, and that she wouldn't hold down a job.
Right.
But up until she actually gave birth to Caylee, she had a really good work history and had received raving reviews from her previous employers. The last one had said that she was up for a managerial promotion and that she really was a hard worker, and like everybody just loved her. So I thought that was really interesting, because I just always thought, she's a piece of shit loser that never does anything for her entire life. And it looks like I almost got the impression that she had a baby. Of course, that you're not going to want to go work the same amount of time. Some women are not going to want to go work the same amount of time they were prior to having a baby. But I almost wonder what Cindy Anthony's opinions of all this are and how they affected what she did. That's just me postulating, but anyway.
So the judge denies her bail, and he says that she has showed woeful disregard for the welfare of her child, and he sets the bond at $500,000. Detective Yuri Melik becomes a little bit more aggressive with her and interrogates her further in order to get some semblance of truth out of this girl.
Sure. Good luck with that, Yuri.
As a result, Casey is arrested for the first time and charged with child neglect, making false official statements, and in obstructing an investigation. They, of course, allowed Casey to make her phone call, and they recorded the whole thing. She tells her mom she was arrested on a, quote, whim, and then she goes on to say, they're blaming me for stuff that I never would do. They're going to pin this on me. Then she argues with her mom, and Cindy says, well, you're not helping anyone to find out where she's at. And when I was listening to the phone call, she just reminded me of a petulant child.
Are you kidding me?
And Casey says, Mom, no.
Mom, no. I don't fucking know where she's at. Are you kidding me? What a baby.
Ugh, it's like listening to a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
And Cindy asks, well, whose fault is it you're in there? And Casey answers, well, it's not my fault. So, because she becomes irate with her mom, she's like, I don't want to talk to you anymore. She asks for her boyfriend Tony's phone number. Cindy then passes the phone along to a family friend who is with her, and she begins asking her questions like, why is everyone saying you're not caring about finding your daughter? Why are you lying? Why are you not showing any emotions? And Casey replies that it's because she has to talk to detectives, and she just can't be seen crying every 2 seconds like she wants to. And then she asks again for Tony's phone number. Like, it's in weird instances that she's like, hey, can I get Tony's phone number? She doesn't want to answer questions, so she's like, can I have Tony's phone number? And because she's frantically doing this, the police quickly mobilize and go to his apartment. Clint House, who was a former friend and roommate of Tony Lazzaro, was there when the police were looking for Tony, who Clint, says was completely taken by surprise and had no idea where Caylee was either. Casey and Tony had begun dating in April of 2008. Clint described Casey as everybody else did, which was charming, bubbly, fun to be around, blah, blah, blah. And only 3 weeks after they started dating, she brought Caylee around for the first time. Which is weird, not that it's weird, but when I was, like I said, my mom was a single mom. She did not bring me around whoever she was dating. Until it was like...
It's a little unsafe because there are pedos out there ready and waiting to date single moms so they can pedo on their kids.
No, not only that, but for the child. Like, the child does get attached to, like, a father figure or whatever. And then if that person isn't going to be around, then that's another loss in their life. It's like a psychological thing that children go through. And anyways, so Clint describes Casey as a loving, attentive mother. And he did spend quite a lot of time around Caylee, who says that she was extremely intelligent for a 2-year-old girl. She could count up to 10 in English and in Spanish. She knew her colors and her shapes. And he said that the relationship between Casey and Caylee was very strong. But while Casey would bring Caylee around 3 times a week at first, it started slowly becoming less and less. And in the middle of June, it was just Casey who was going over to the apartment. Casey never mentioned Caylee was missing, and whenever they would ask where Caylee was, Casey would just say she was with the nanny or her parents. Now, during this time, while scouring for additional clues as to where Caylee would be, John Allen noticed something strange. There wasn't just one 911 call from Cindy Anthony, there were 3. Now, like we said before, the first call was the one that the police investigated. It was the 98 Sunfire. Cindy had said smelled like something died in the car. And when police investigated that, they said that the entire bay of the 2-car garage the car was sitting in smelled of whatever odor was emanating from the vehicle, and it is described by investigators as smelling like decomposition, and that there was no question in their mind that there had been a dead body in the vehicle. I don't know.
We'll talk in more depth about the trunk situation soon.
So then a cadaver dog was called in. It's reported that the cadaver dog smelled every part of the car and stops and alerts on the trunk area of the vehicle. Forensic experts open the trunk to examine whatever is inside, and it appears to have been vacuumed out. They start gathering whatever evidence they can that is still there and make what they say is a major discovery. One of the prosecutors of the Casey Anthony case, Jeff Ashton, states that in addition to the smell, investigators could also see a stained area on the trunk liner the size of a child's body.
Meh, we'll see about that.
They take a snippet of the carpet to test for evidence, and they also find inside the trunk several human hairs, which could be Caylee's, and also sent out for forensic analysis. They call Cindy and George to question them about the car, and Cindy explains that she had initially called 911 because Casey had abandoned the vehicle as it had run out of gas at a check cashing place and had been towed. Police then pressed Cindy on the dead body smell, and she told police that when they picked up the vehicle, they aired it out and found a bag of garbage in the trunk. Kevin Berry, sheriff of Orange County at the time, stated that Cindy's story does not jive with what is on the 911 call, and all of a sudden she changes her tone, saying that the odor had to have been an old pizza in a box in the bag of garbage, which we discussed.
Yeah.
So at this point, Cindy seems torn between wanting to find Caylee and also trying to protect her daughter. And later, George, Casey's father, asks to speak to detectives alone. He says he had very bad vibes from that first day he picked the car up from the impound lot, and as he was a former law enforcement officer, was probably coming to terms that Caylee wasn't alive. He says, "I don't want to believe that I have raised someone who could do something to another person."
You're a fucking twat.
After speaking with police, George and Cindy make several visits to Casey in jail. He still says good dad things, though, and tells her that he wishes he could hug her and take all her pain away. Cindy takes the phone and immediately starts crying, saying that Caylee was reported dead that morning. Casey has zero emotion to this, and she says, "Surprise, surprise."
Which, what does that mean? Is that because she's like, we already know she's dead, you two dumb fucks?
Honestly, seeing her reaction gave me such visceral anger. Like, she was annoyed with the statement. Casey then, after the statement that her daughter has been reported as dead, which would give any normal mom a reaction like, "What?
Yeah.
They say to my daughter's," like, she's like annoyed with the, anyways.
Well, I mean, in her defense, she already fucking knows it.
Well, of course she already. Anyways. So Casey goes on and she's like, "I've been here for a whole month and nobody understands how she feels and nobody's letting her talk, and this moment is the only time I've seen her start crying. Because she's a spoiled fucking brat. And she says that her whole life has been taken from her. Blah, blah, blah. And she's just like this totally explosive person who her parents are tiptoeing around, not wanting to upset.
I gotta say also, I mean, if my dad did some shit too, and I was sitting there, I'd be like, bitch, what about you? Granted, I know my daughter would be dead, but I also would never have gone through all this charade. But if I was in her position and my dad had something to do with it, period, or alone or with me, I would be like, you fucking bitch. And you're sitting there being like, what can I do? And if you're sitting there saying that shit in that context, you just sound like you're almost taunting me, you know? Like, so anyway.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from.
Okay. I think George Anthony is a piece of garbage human garbage.
Okay.
So is Casey Anthony, but that's what I was saying, everyone. My hatred and fury that I have had all my life that I've known about Casey Anthony has really shifted a little because George Anthony created this walking mental instability. Okay.
So here's the thing that made me think, okay, no, this person is a terrible, terrible, terrible piece of shit. During their phone call, Casey says, Mom, because this is recording and I don't know who's going to see things and who's going to misconstrue whatever else, there's things that I need to say directly to each of you. And it's at this point that Cindy kind of sees these words as like a cue to shut up.
So what, do you just not hear it or what?
What do you mean?
What is she saying?
So she goes on to say, Cindy goes on to ask, well, what do you think is going on with Caylee? Sorry. And Casey goes, I know in my heart she's out there. I know in my heart she's close.
Yeah, right by your house because you buried her there.
Right.
Right.
So they have very little to go on, but investigators find Zenaida Gonzalez. They hold her for questioning, and she's middle-aged. She's not 25. She doesn't know who Casey or Caylee Anthony are, and she lives in Kissimmee, which is 20 miles south of Orlando. Okay. She has nothing to do with Caylee's disappearance, which investigators verify to be true. And again, Casey Anthony is a liar.
No.
I know. So while in prison, another inmate gives Casey the name of an attorney, Jose Baez. And this guy is such a fucking sleaze. And literally nobody has anything nice to say about this fucker.
Oh, I do. I don't hate him as much as you do.
Okay.
And it's fine. And he's a really good lawyer too. But we'll continue.
Great. He's a good lawyer. So was OJ's team.
Well, but honestly, the facts of the trial make him out to be way less of a sleaze than the prosecution, who was essentially cherry picking witnesses and manipulating evidence to try to suit their needs.
Oh, I don't like the manipulation of witnesses at all. I don't like that he wasn't, I mean, and I can appreciate that he was protecting his client because that's his client. That's somebody who hired him to protect them. However, he was making it very difficult for anybody to interview her. And I still think she's a piece of shit, and I still think she did it.
Yeah.
She did it where she covered something up.
I mean...
So,
yeah.
I'm just a huge proponent of allowing people to find the truth and not obstructing the path to the truth.
Well...
But that's just me.
I would argue that he was the only one that was making a point to present factual evidence instead of evidence they created, like the prosecution was, which is essentially blocking the truth. So I don't know who I would say was blocking the truth more in this situation, honestly.
Okay.
Because what they were doing, the prosecution, what they were claiming to try to do was prove that Casey Anthony murdered her child. And what they ended up doing was allowing George Anthony to get up as a star witness and just muddle the facts of every single thing up. But regardless, we disagree.
I mean, once we get into the trial, that's going to be something that we go into. So Cindy and George begin a massive search for Caylee while Casey's in jail, even hiring Tim Miller, who was the founder of the Texas EquiSearch. The day after Cindy calls him, he makes his way to Florida, where 4,200 people showed up to help for 4 weeks. Ground teams, divers, dogs, all helped to no avail.
I find that to be pretty weird.
That they would hire somebody from Texas for Florida?
No, I find it... No, Texas EquiSearch goes all over the country. I find it to be pretty weird that they had all that help and she was found down the road.
In their backyard. Yeah.
I wonder when she was actually put there. Who fucking knows? But, okay.
So on July 29th, Casey was offered a limited immunity deal by prosecutors, which she did not take. From August 11th to the 13th, Roy Kronk, who was a meter reader and utility worker, called the police about a suspicious object he found in a forested area around the Anthony's residence. On his first call, he was directed to call the sheriff's office tip line, which he did, but he didn't get a call back. On his second call, he was eventually met by 2 police officers, and he reported to them that he had seen what appeared to be a skull near a gray bag. And in this instance, the officer conducted a short search and stated he did not see anything. The officer was described as being rude and very short with him.
Are you fucking with me right now? There's a child that the whole country is talking about missing a block away from her home. And there's a man telling you they found a bag with a skull, and you're ignoring everything.
Yeah. So Casey is incarcerated for about a month and released on August 21st. The public, unsurprisingly, goes into a frenzy because of the media, and they do show up to the Anthony residence calling Casey a baby killer. They call George a coward, and they call Cindy a bad mother.
Well, why isn't George a bad father? What's this bad mother business? Like, we're all bad here.
Yeah. And in the meantime, results come in from the vehicle, and the police believe they have probable cause to charge Casey Anthony with the murder of Caylee.
Woot.
On August 29th, Casey is arrested again on charges of writing 4 checks worth nearly $650 on Amy Zenga's checking account without permission.
This hoe.
Orange County police say that the charges are unrelated to the investigation. No shit. Prosecutors offer Casey a limited immunity deal related to the false statements given to law enforcement about locating her child. She refuses it. On September 5th, due to the nephew of California bail bondsman and bounty hunter Leonard Padilla posting her bail in the hope that she would cooperate with the investigation and that Caylee would be found, her parents had signed a promissory note for her bail to be posted. And during this release, she was also fitted with an electronic tracking device, placing her on house arrest. September 6, 2008, deputies seize a handgun from the trunk of George Anthony's car because having a gun on the property violates Casey's bail. George says he planned to use it to force Casey's friends to tell him what happened to Caylee. You really
are such a stupid idiot.
That's a dumb lie.
It's so dumb. I mean, all of his lies are dumb. He's such an idiot. You were gonna threaten people with a gun. Okay.
Listen, well, just say that you were using it for protection.
Just say that you were gonna go shoot your stupid head off.
Just say you were using it for protection, or you were gonna... It's your pastime. You like shooting guns. That's the worst lie. Okay. So, here's where we start to dip our toes a little bit further into the JonBenet Ramsey territory. On September 10th, the whole family allegedly refuses to take a lie detector test offered by both the FBI and local authorities. And that always creeps me out about a family who's distraught about a missing child. I feel like if you're really looking for a child that you truly believe to be missing, you're going to do everything you possibly can and really be as compliant as possible in order to find out everything that you can find out about what happened.
I would agree with you about giving statements or talking to the police, but for a lie detector test is just bullshit. They're just trying to make you think you lied.
Well, I mean, a lie detector test can be passed, but it's
inadmissible in court in the first place. So what's the point? I don't know. I don't know if I would take a lie detector test. myself.
I would if I was innocent.
Well,
100%
yeah, but
I would.
You could be just nervous, and it's also pointless. It's pointless.
It is. I'm not arguing that it's not pointless.
Okay, continue.
But if I was innocent, I would be like, yeah, I'll take it.
But innocent people get charged with crimes, so I don't
Of course they do.
I don't trust them to give me that lie detector test.
So anyways, delving out of that conspiracy theory territory, September 25th, Zenaida Fernandez Gonzalez, the woman that Casey Anthony reportedly named as an alleged babysitter and suspect in the case, and again, that had never met Casey Anthony and never babysat Caylee, files a defamation lawsuit against her.
Don't blame her.
I don't blame her either. October 14th, Casey Anthony is indicted by a grand jury on charges of first-degree murder, aggravated child abuse, aggravated manslaughter of a child, and 4 counts of providing false information to police. Judge John Jordan orders that she be held without bond. But on October 21st, the charges of child neglect are dropped against Casey, according to the state attorney's office, because, quote, as the evidence proved that the child was deceased, the state sought an indictment on the legally appropriate charges. On October 28th, Casey Anthony is arraigned and pleads not guilty to all charges. November 8th to 9th, Texas EquiSearch leads hundreds of volunteers in a search of a grid for Caylee, but when nothing is found, they suspend their search. November 15th, 2008, the Anthony family's private investigator, Dominic Casey, searches the area where Caylee's remains later are found. The search is videotaped. The family's attorney denies asking Dominic Casey to search there, and the defense questions who sent him into the area. He says that a psychic gave him the tip, and according to the prosecution, the area was under several inches of water at the time.
It's very likely that the stupid family sent him there because they knew her body was there.
December 5th, the state initially says it will not seek the death penalty against Casey Anthony, and Roy Crunk calls again for the 4th time on December 11th, 2008, where 2-year-old Caylee's skeletal remains were found with a blanket inside a trash bag in the same wooded area, about 20 feet away from the main road near the Anthony family's house. Investigative reports and trial testimony varied between duct tape being found near the front of the skull and on the mouth of the skull. The medical examiner mentioned duct tape as one of the reasons she ruled the death a homicide, but officially listed it as death by undetermined means. Over the next 4 days, more bones were found in the area near the spot where the remains initially had been discovered, and finally, on December 19th, 2008, medical examiner Jen Garavaglia confirmed that the remains found were, in fact, those of Caylee Anthony.
It only took months for this dude to get this call answered by the police. And they speculate, which we'll get into later, or next episode, they speculate that he might have even moved the remains closer to the road because he was having so much trouble getting the police to go further into the woods to look for this bag that he is claiming. And also, I mean, he wants to help for sure, but there was a large reward that was being offered for the discovery of her remains, and this motherfucker was like, give me my money and don't let anyone else find it. So little Caylee, her remains are found finally, and next episode we're going to get into the absolute shit show that is the trial, and I'm hoping to bring Bianca a little bit more on my side here. But I mean, I'm not on Casey. I'm not on Top Mom's side here. I just think that her fucked up family and her fucked up father had a lot to do with it. And I also am not sure that she was going out murdering her kid. But we'll get into all the reasons why I have come to this conclusion and what Bianca comes to the conclusion of next episode.
All right, guys, we'll see you next time. Thank you so much.
Okay, we'll see you next week for part 2 of Casey Anthony. Creep it real out there.